Hey guys, Mystic Diamond here, and welcome back to the Mystic Diamond School for those on the path of ascension and transcending their process of transcendence. We are doing the second class today, so I want to welcome all of you who are new and all of you back who were with me for the first class. I just want to quickly rehash the first class before we get into today's topic, just very briefly, because it does sort of meld into everything else. So in the first class, in case you missed it, we did discuss soul contracts. We talked about how your soul made an agreement with God before you were born, and your soul made this agreement had to make this agreement with God before you could be born, because this agreement detailed every single thing that you will go through from the moment you are born until the moment you die. We also discussed, I also burst a bubble when it came to free will, especially when it came to free will in the soul matrix. Okay, I then went on to discuss with you how free will slightly changes in the monad, and then it gets increasingly more and more as you get up to the avatar, so that you have that complete free will once you have ascended and become an ascended master. I hope that you're all doing okay. I know that I burst a lot of bubbles in that first class, but it will make things a little bit easier as we do progress. The reason why I had to start with soul contracts, as I said, is because of the fact that it does meld into everything else. But let's not talk anymore about that first class. If you have missed it, feel free to go back and watch that one. Let's start with today's class, and today we are going to be discussing soul core wounds. Now, the reason that I'm doing soul core wounds second, I didn't originally, but the reason I'm doing it second now is because it seems to me to be the most appropriate topic to be discussing for the second class, because soul core wounds comes up prior to your activation, okay? Now, to give you somewhat of a definition, soul core wounds are events that happen in your human's life. Remember, we discussed in the soul contracts video how there's your soul and your human. So, soul core wounds are events that happen in your human's life that your soul has contracted you to go through directly, indirectly, by which I mean witness, or both, going through it directly and witnessing it. Now, I've had a ton of you come back to me via email and ask me, how do I know if I'm an angelic? And I think this is an amazing question. Soul core wounds is a very big part of what angelics go through. Every single angelic has been contracted to go through soul core wounds. So if you have gone through soul core wounds, then it is possible that you are an angelic. I guess what I'm trying to say here is, if you have not gone through soul core wounds, but you have been activated or awoken, then I would say that you're not an angelic, because every angelic needs to go through soul core wounds before they are activated. Now, I am going to warn you, this is going to be another tough one to discuss. I can't wait to get to the good stuff. But this is going to be another tough one to discuss, so please prepare yourself for that. I'm going to try and get through this in as simplified a way as I possibly can. So therefore, if you would like me to elaborate, I will. But I am going to need to use some technical terms so that you get used to this terminology, and if you would like for me to elaborate a little bit on these terms that I'm using, also please don't hesitate to email me. So, as I said before, soul core wounds are events that happen in your human's life that your soul has contracted you to go through directly, indirectly, to witness, or both. Now, what types of soul core wounds do we go through? Well, there are 5 different categories. I'm going to show you now what they are. So this is just... Oh, sorry about the light there. Okay. This is... these are the 5 categories of soul core wounds, and naturally within these categories there are subcategories. So, we have addiction, abandonment and separation, sexual misery and worthiness, betrayal and rejection, and victim and victimizer. And I will go into great detail of victimizer towards the end of the video, but as you can see here, there is a polarity with this one. The victim, we obviously know what victim means, and the victimizer, the opposite to being a victim, the one making the victim, you know, the victimizer. So this is a very interesting one in of itself, as the rest are. So over the course of today's lesson, I am going to be discussing all of these soul core wounds with you, and I might just hang this up in the background. There we go. I might just come over to the side a little bit so you can see that. Alright, I'll have this here in the background so that we can refer back to it when we need to. Okay? And so I'm going to start off by discussing the first soul core wound. Actually, before I do that, I want to give you a little bit of background. I'm sure that some of you are wondering why we need to go through these soul core wounds. Okay? Why were these contracted? Why do I have to go through addiction? Or why do I have to witness others who are going through addictions? Why did I have to be abandoned? Why do I have to go through sexual misery? Why do I have to be rejected? Why do I have to be the victim? Why do I have to be the victimizer? The reason that soul core wounds exist is because they need to be cleared. As I said, if you are an angelic, you will definitely have gone through these prior to being activated. You've gone through these to clear these timelines, okay? Because there are many timelines that exist that angelics go through, and I know that this is starting to become very technical, so again, if you wish for me to elaborate, I will. I am going to do an informative video on timelines, so just letting you know, that will come up. But we go through many, many timelines. We need to clear these, okay, from ourselves and going through it because of those around us before we can be activated, okay? Yeah, so as I was saying, every single angelic has to endure soul core wounds. That's just the way it is. There's no getting out of it. So if you are an angelic, you've gone through all of these. And with victimizer, this gets very technical, and as I say, I will get to that one last. But let's look at the first one, shall we? Addiction. Now, you know, when we look at this word, it does conjure up thoughts of many different things, doesn't it? Addiction to smoking, addiction to coffee, addiction to gambling. You know, I have some examples here. Drugs, alcohol, sex addiction, shopping, medication, OCD, as I said, gambling. Okay? So there are many different types of addictions, and it's not too hard for you to think of some examples yourself of addictions that are out there. Now, when it comes to addictions, please note that you either have or had some of these addictions, or you were surrounded by people who do. If you are in the latter category, this happened to tempt you into this addiction. Alright? Now, my higher self wants me to give you some examples when it comes to these soul core wounds of things that I've gone through personally, just to really show you what I'm saying by all this, and also to tell you that you're not alone when these things happen. So when it comes to addiction, the example that they wanted me to share with you, or that my higher self wanted me to share with you, is that when I'm going to refer to alcohol here. Now, I never really was a big drinker. Yes, when I turned 18, which in Australia is the legal age where you can start drinking, I was very excited because I could have my first legal taste of alcohol. And I'd had one sip of Midori, I think when I was 17. And I loved it so much that I said on my 18th birthday, I want a Midori. So I had a glass of Midori to myself, and I quite liked it. As time went on and I tried all different other alcoholic beverages, you know, Jim Beam, wine, beer, you name it, you know, I tried them all. They just didn't sit well with me. It's not that I'm personally against anyone who wants to have a drink, but drinking just never really sat well with me. So especially with wine, I only found there was one wine that I could sip on a little bit, and that's a Pepper Jack Shiraz. I was at a particular point in time, and this is what I'm going to go into for my example. I was with my ex, and we were together for 5 years. Now, my ex, his company sold wine. They manufactured their own label, and his job was to go out and do wine tastings with people at their residence or wherever they choose to have the wine tasting being held, with the purpose to sell this wine. So for me, I needed to witness this as someone who really, wasn't into drinking. It didn't do anything for me. I had to witness this to be able to get through this addiction so-called wound. Over time, things happened, and my ex ended up losing his job. And what this did was it changed him quite a bit, and he was drinking every day. It was almost like it was a requirement for him. And yeah, I'm going to detach from the emotion connected to it. But yeah, it got to a stage where my ex was drinking 2 bottles of wine every single night, and that was at a minimum. Whenever we would go out and do some shopping or just drive the car somewhere, we always stopped by a famous liquor store in Australia, and my ex would go in and buy the exact same 2 bottles of wine and take them home because he needed both of them to get through the evening. For me, this was an extremely tough and difficult situation to get through because, 1, I don't drink, and 2, having him drink, he wasn't the best drunk. Sometimes when people drink, they're funny and happy and bubbly, but my ex wasn't like that. He got, very angry and and other things as well that I won't go into too much detail about. It has been a little while since we have parted ways, and I'm very grateful for that. But the point is, I needed to be in this situation to go through and work through the so-called wound of addiction. Okay? I had to be there to witness it, to witness him being addicted to alcohol. I needed to witness the effects that alcohol were having on him, and I also needed to directly go through what it was like to be with someone who was an alcoholic and deal with that so-called wound. This was not fun at all. It was very tough for me to go through, but what I've come to realize since I have been activated is it was necessary because I need to clear that timeline. Now, quite a bit later actually, I would say maybe 5 or 6 years later, so this was at least 10 years ago when we were together. About 5 or 6 years later, I was with a friend who was playing softball. And I went to watch her play, and very quickly I became, shall we say, loosely inducted into the team. I never played, but because I went to watch them a lot of the time, I was given like a hat and a, what do you call it, like we call it a stubby holder here, but those holders where you can put like a can of beer or a bottle of beer in. I was given a stubby holder and a hat from their team, and basically loosely inducted into their team as like a member who came to watch. One day I was advised that in our area we were hosting a big tournament and they were looking for volunteers, and there weren't a lot of people on the team that were able to step up for whatever reason. So without thinking, I volunteered my services and said, I'll do, whatever you guys want me to do. After completing my volunteering that I did for them, the team was so grateful that they went out and they bought me a 6-pack of Jim Beams, which is lovely of them that they bought it for me because it was a kind gesture. This team is the kind of team that they go out, they play their softball, and then after a while they have a few drinks together and they have a laugh, and then they go home. So there was no violence or anything that happened with it. It was just a way to relax for them, and so for them, they felt like they were doing a really good job for me. The reason I needed to receive this gift, as opposed to anything else, was again to continue to clear the addiction timeline. Now, I am very lucky that when it comes to alcohol, I have not experienced anything since. It's not to say that it won't come back up, but I have not experienced anything since in the addiction timeline. Now, when it comes to addictions that I have, because, of course, I'm going to be honest with you guys and put stuff out there to you about addictions that I have. I have 2 addictions. Coffee is a major addiction, and my over time, with my process of transcendence and my path of ascension, I have cut down on the amount of coffee that I do drink. I used to be a writer, so my day would consist of me writing my novels all day. And so because of this, I would go through at least 10 cups of coffee a day. You know, on a good day, I would say 10 cups of coffee a day. So eventually, I was guided to cut that back down to 1 coffee. And I still do have my 1 coffee in the morning, but I don't really have any more than that. My second addiction is smoking. I do smoke cigarettes. I'm not going to hide that from you guys because it would be unbecoming of an angelic to hold something back. So I do smoke cigarettes. Yes, I do. They do allow me to do this, but again, it's putting me through the addiction timeline. And that is something that I'm mindful of. Okay? Now, something to be very mindful of as well when it comes to the addiction timeline is that you may be tempted by friends, family members, or groups that you are a part of to be involved in an addiction. Okay? You might be tempted to do something, whether it's drinking alcohol, taking drugs, smoking, whatever it is. We call this lovely thing peer pressure. And this does happen. So, yeah, a personal example for me, because bless them, wanting me to give you all these personal examples, but, you know, if it helps, I'm happy to discuss it. The first one is gambling. I have not gambled for a very, very, very long time because I learned a lesson very early on, but there were people around me who were gambling, and I witnessed that, and then after witnessing it, I decided that, you know what, why don't I go to the poker machines and play the poker machines? And one day what ended up happening was I went in there planning on spending, I think it was like $10 and walking out, which I had done a couple of times prior to that. I'd put in $10, whatever I'd won, I just walked away. This particular time I was having so much fun with this particular machine that I ended up working through my entire paycheck that I had only just received a couple of days before. This taught me a very valuable lesson, and I have not gambled since. But being around those who did, I guess I could say motivated me to do it, and this is part of the soul core wounds, being around those who do, and therefore it tempts you, it tempts you to do it as well. Another example they want me to point out to you is drugs. I have only ever done 1 drug in my life, and that is marijuana. I have smoked marijuana before, and I'm going to be upfront with you guys about this. So, when I was very, very, very young, almost don't want to say how young, but very young, I had, my best friend lived down the street from me, and, yeah, one day he was showing me that he smoked, and this led to a very interesting conversation, and I had my first taste of marijuana at a very young age, and I don't really know the impact that it had on me, because what happened was, I was pressured into doing it. I didn't realize this at the time, but I was coerced into doing it because my friend said, if you have a smoke, we'll have some ice cream afterwards. And so, wanting ice cream, I had a smoke. But as I got older, I ended up making friends with someone who smoked marijuana for many reasons, reasons that were actually helping her. For one thing, she has a physical disability that is very painful for her to deal with, and so by her smoking marijuana, it actually assists with that. And the second thing, she has a lot of anxiety and how would you say this? She's an over-analyzer and all these sorts of things, and so smoking assists her. Because I was around her all the time, I was tempted into smoking, and so I did. When I was with my my ex that I was talking about with the addiction of alcohol, because of everything that I was going through with my ex, I did turn to smoking marijuana to help me through that process and escape my reality. This is all part of going through the soul core wound of addiction, whether it's directly, indirectly for you to witness, or both. Okay? Now, when you come to the realization that addictions are something you had to go through to clear that template, that timeline, you will need to energetically purge it. Now, I've spoken of energetic purging before, and if there's anyone out there who would like for me to elaborate on energetic purging, please don't hesitate to email me, and I will do that. We will get into energetic purging at some point, but because soul core wounds occur prior to you being activated if you are an angelic, this is the right time to be discussing soul core wounds. Alright, let's move on to the second soul core wound, which is abandonment and separation. Okay? Now, let's go through some examples of abandonment and separation. We have friends, abandonment and separation of friends, of family, your counterpart, absolutely. So if you've met your counterpart in the physical reality prior to being activated, and then you've split apart because of everything to do with the soul contract when it comes to counterparts. And feeling like you have been separated and abandoned from the divine. Okay, call it what you will. God, the source, call it what you will. Okay, so those are some examples there. Now, please note something that, that I need to let you guys know. Owing to the mirroring aspects between you and your counterpart, when you go through counterpart abandonment and separation, that is because you both need to go through that. But also please realize, I have discussed unity consciousness before. I've kind of covered this up a little bit, but I've discussed unity consciousness before. Please know when it comes to you and your counterpart that you are never truly separated. It is more going through the process of believing that you are separated. Okay? I'm so happy that I do have these notes in front of me because there's a lot to go through when it comes to these soul core wounds. Okay. Again, and please also know that you are never separated from God, the source, the divine, whatever terminology it is that you use. Throughout my process, I went from saying the divine to saying God, the God that I've come to know on the path of ascension. Okay? Alright, so, here's another personal example. Bless. I've experienced abandonment and separation with friends, best friends, family members, lovers. My mum and dad went through a divorce when I was really young, and so I went through the separation between me and my father. I would see my father once a fortnight after my mum and dad divorced, and they divorced when I was 7, so I was quite young. And owing to the circumstances and how things worked out, I almost felt like I grew up without a father. Now, technically, this is not true because my father still existed, and I did see him once a fortnight. Most of the time, anyway. I saw him once a fortnight. But because he wasn't there with me in my family home, I felt quite separated from him. And there are other circumstances, other situations as well that I don't really want to go too much into at the moment because things have changed since then. And I have a great loving relationship with my dad at the moment, and we've never been as close as we are now. But at that time, yeah, I definitely felt separated from my father. Despite the fact that I saw him every second weekend, I felt like there was a disconnect. And when you go through things, especially for me as a male, but I think it's the same regardless if you're male or female growing up, everyone wants their dad, their mum and their dad for all different reasons. So that was very tough for me. But that's definitely examples of abandonment and separation that I've gone through. Now, please know that working through and purging these soul core wounds, especially this one, will help you to come to a place of what we call detachment. Now, detachment serves your highest good when it comes to many different things. And if we are to go with this example of abandonment and separation, if you, say, have a best friend and you have a falling out, and for whatever reason, you break apart and you don't talk to each other anymore, yes, my advice will be to energetically purge that, but then coming from a place of detachment helps with that as well. Like, you know what, it is what it is. And it's interesting, detachment has taken me a very long way, and there are some things that I will discuss with you when I get into the higher dimensional tasks that I do, that I do need to be careful when I discuss this with certain family members. So, you know what, yeah, I'm being told, no, say it now. Okay, I'll say it now. One of my higher dimensional tasks that I have done in the past is soul removal work. So, as I'm sure you can imagine, the process of removing the soul from the human and taking it where it does need to go. I've done this I had done this for quite a while. This has changed. I have very recently been moved over to do healing. But I had done soul removal work for quite some time. Owing to the amount of soul removal work that I had done, I had to learn to detach, because it was a requirement for my job. I had to learn to detach from the feelings and emotions that welled up inside of me when someone passed away, because I couldn't very well do, say, at least 20 soul removals a night, and that's on a good night. 20 soul removals a night and be crying over every single one because I wouldn't be able to get the job done. How this affected me in the physical reality is that the detachment became rather firm, and when I find out when certain people pass away, there's a certain sense of that detachment still with me of, okay, well, I mean, I guess it is sad, but I know that they've passed on for a reason, and I know where they're going because of what I have done. And so it's a little bit tough in that way when it comes to detachment, to sort of think, oh wait, hang on, I'm talking to someone who's not on their path, who is on their path but isn't awakened to their path yet, so how do I respond to this? But detachment does serve your highest good when it comes to things that are holding you back, okay? So I had to energetically purge the ex I was telling you about with the addiction of alcohol, and that was something. That was quite a lot to get through, but since then I've been able to detach from that situation, and that's where I'm able to be here with you guys today discussing it. And though there were a couple of emotions that wanted to come out, had I been discussing this with you even a year ago, I would have been bawling my eyes out discussing everything that I went through with my ex that was addicted to alcohol. So attachment does serve to benefits like that, where I'm able to be in this situation and discuss these things with you. Okay? So when you work through and then purge these soul core wounds, you will come to that place of detachment. You will learn detachment, and you will also learn how it will benefit you as you do move forward. Okay? Alright, so the next one that we're going to talk about is betrayal and... oh, sorry, no, it's not. It's sexual misery and worthiness. Owing to this soul core wound, sexual misery and worthiness, I am going to make this a restricted 18 plus video, at least for now. If you guys think that I should take the restriction off, I will. Just a moment, guys, I'll be right back. Sorry about that. Yeah, if you guys think that I should take the restriction off, I will, but because I am going to be talking about sexual misery, I think it best that I put a restriction onto this video. I am going to warn you, okay, if this does trigger you, I do apologise. I am coming from a place of educating with the soul core wounds, and sexual misery just happens to be one of them, okay? I'm not doing it for sexual misery, it just happens to be one of the soul core wounds, and I want to discuss every one of them with you. If I do bring up something that does trigger you, you will need to go and energetically purge it. If I bring up something that triggers you and you wish to discuss it with me, please don't hesitate to email me. And if you don't wish to discuss it with me, but you wish to discuss energetic purging with me, please don't hesitate to email me as well, okay? Alright, now that I have that warning out the way, let's dive right into sexual misery and worthiness, okay? So some examples of sexual misery do include, and this is where, again, I just have to point this out because my high self's like, yeah, you can actually use this now. Detachment helps me. I can detach from everything that I'm feeling about sexual misery to discuss it with you from a neutral standpoint. Okay, so some examples include sexual abuse, sleaziness, being hit on, And as far as worthiness, feeling unworthy and being triggered by others to feel unworthy or by their feelings of unworthiness. So remember how I was saying earlier that sometimes it's directly and sometimes it's indirectly because you're witnessing it. As I said with the addiction, with my ex, I was witnessing him going through this addiction of alcohol. Sometimes you will witness others having that sense of unworthiness. Those who are around you, it might be a close friend or a family member, so you're witnessing it that way rather than going through it directly. It all comes down to what your soul has contracted, which is again why we had to do soul contracts first. Okay, so now please note that the original waves, so we are the next level of waves, okay? There was an original set of waves that went through their path of ascension. We are the new generation of waves that are going through, okay? Please keep that in mind, and I can elaborate on that if you would like to email me. I'll get into more about that. Please know that the original waves dealt with harsher tones of soul core wounds. And this is also the case when it comes to the waves that are here at the moment as well. Yes, the original ones did, but it also is the case with the ones here as well. With the waves, so we have the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth wave. I've discussed this before with you guys. What is important to note is that each wave came about at different times. The first wavers of this new ascension came about first, the second wavers came about second, third wavers came about third, so on and so forth. The first wavers experience everything more harshly in this new ascension, more harshly than any of the other waves, and it goes down in a cascading way, I guess you could say. So the second wavers will feel things harshly to a lesser degree than the first wavers, but will still feel things harshly, and third wavers will feel things harshly but to a lesser degree than the second wavers, and so on and so forth. So please be aware of that, you know, the first wavers who have ascended, and this is where I always, promote is not the word I would like to use, but it's one they're telling me to use. I always like to promote the first wavers and the respect that I do have for them and the gratitude I have for them. The first wavers had to go through everything first because with this new ascension process, it was... I'll get into this in another informative video, but to give you a very quick idea, because this was new, for the first wavers, everything was very experimental, and they didn't really know what it was that they were coming into. Whereas the second, third, fourth, and fifth wavers, the first wavers had covered that ground, and then we were experiencing, second, third, fourth, and fifth wavers, what the first wavers had already dealt with. And so therefore there was the terminology and everything else like soul core wounds, unity consciousness, etc, etc, etc. So a lot of praise and thanks absolutely go to our ascended masters, our fellow wavers, the first wavers. Okay? Where was I? So please know that the first wavers do deal with harsher tones of soul core wounds. And also note that the templates you deal with, specifically, does, not surprisingly again, come back to your soul's contract. Okay? So, whichever ones you are dealing with, whichever ones you're dealing with directly, whichever ones you're dealing with indirectly, whichever ones you're dealing with directly and indirectly does come back to your soul's contract. But if you are an angelic, you have at least experienced one of these prior to being activated. Okay? Alright. Okay, so they want me to talk to you about personal experience, and I am, again, going to detach when I talk about this, because getting emotional for the sake of being educational is not going to assist, and so that's why I'm not going to allow, or going to really try hard not to allow my emotions to come through with this, because it's just for the purpose of providing an example to you guys. Okay? So, personally, I have experienced rape. Yes, I have when I was younger. Yeah. So I've experienced that. I've experienced sleaziness, yes. Being hit on by older guys, yes. Feeling like I wasn't worthy of anything, yeah. And wanting to let go, give up, and also to commit suicide. All of these things I have experienced, and it does come back to sexual misery and worthiness. And they all occurred prior to me being activated. Okay? Now, please know that this part of the soul core wounds does also include one-night stands, okay, with sexual misery. Includes one-night stands. This goes against your soul's contract and represents as feeling unworthy of a relationship with your counterpart. And I do need to make that point. With your counterpart. I am going to go into more detail about this when I do a counterpart video, but please know that for the sake of sexual misery and worthiness. Also note that we cleared these soul core wounds to make it easier on humanity. So I was saying before, and it's a very good point to bring up again, how there was the old ascension process and now we have the new ascension process. And this is something that I want you guys to keep an eye out for as well. If you're doing research about stuff online or whatever, there is stuff out there about the old ascension process and now there is the new ascension process. The old ascension... those who are in the old ascension process have completed all of those templates. They have been broken down. That has been completed. And that's why we're now in the new ascension process, okay? So I need to let you guys know that. But yeah, we are clearing this to make it easier on humanity because eventually everyone is going to go through their ascension process and their process of transcendence. It's going to happen. Eventually everyone will. So, and this is one of the great things for you to hold on to. If you have been awoken, whether you have been awoken or not, because as you can look at it from both angles, everyone will at some point go through their process of transcendence and their path of ascension. It is going to happen. Because the point is that we are here to help heal, assist and guide humanity to rehabilitate the world. So this is going to happen. It just comes down to, again, when it's contracted for them to go through it. The more we get through soul core wounds and clear these templates, the easier it becomes when humanity makes their way through their process of transcendence and their path of ascension. Does that make sense? Excellent. Alright, I'm going to pause the video for just a moment and I will be right back. Alright, sorry I keep pausing the video. I'm receiving a lot of energetic attacks at the moment through my clairsentience, so there are times where I need to pause and I do apologise about that. Now I do realise that this has been a long video, but I have been advised from my higher self that it's easier to just get through all of it in one hit than do a part 1 and a part 2. So I hope you're staying with me. Again, any questions or comments, anything you'd like me to elaborate on, please don't hesitate to email me. Let's move forward. Excuse me. Alright, the next one, the fourth one. Betrayal and rejection. Okay? So, some examples of betrayal and rejection do include the swapping out of ID codes, which, again, I will elaborate on when I get into counterparts, but to put a long story short, on other timelines, testing timelines, I guess you could say, and I do apologise if I trigger anyone with this, there are some that are part of the AI and demonics who test on counterparts, who will take samples from counterparts and place them into others to confuse that that being's counterpart. Does that make sense? So let's say that counterpart A is forcibly tested upon and there is some things that are taken from them, okay? And those things are injected into person C, and this confuses person B, who says, well, person A is my counterpart, but what's going on here because I feel a connection to you. This is something, as I said, that I will go into more detail about when I discuss counterparts, but it does come up in the betrayal and rejection soul core wound, and if, for whatever reason, you're watching this back after I've done the counterparts video and I'm referring back to this video, that's why we include this example, the swapping of ID codes. Family, friends, feeling like you're not good enough through the betrayal and the rejection, okay? Now, if you have come into your team, again, I am going to discuss teams, but if you have come into your team, please discuss the soul core wounds with your team. You'll find a lot of answers when you do. And I'm sure there are things that have come up for you already with me discussing addiction, abandonment, separation, and sexual misery and worthiness. I'm sure there's at least something that you're going, oh my gosh, yeah. Yeah, I remember going through that. what's going on. If you've come into your team, discuss it with them, okay? Alright, now, please know, betrayal and rejection, when this happens on a human level, okay, remember, soul and human, on a human level, it also includes jobs, ceremonies and celebrations, and you will go through a range of emotions with all of these, okay? Now, they want me to talk to you about my experience of the swapping of ID codes. This is very interesting that they want me to discuss this with you. Okay, so when I was first activated, I came into the knowledge of who my counterpart was, okay, and I have said this to you guys before, that when it comes to the path of ascension and the process of transcendence, there is a 0.01% chance that you will be taken off the path. Now, if you are taken off the path, this has an effect on your counterpart, because your counterpart feels it because of the connection that you have. However, if you are taken off the path, please note that there is always a backup plan to a backup plan to a backup plan to a backup plan. There's always a backup ready to go. If you are taken off the path, okay, then the counterpart connection is placed into another human, okay? That human becomes activated, that human becomes your counterpart. And it gets very technical, but I just want to give you this rough idea of what I'm trying to say here, because this is part of my example. For me, I had a former counterpart when I was first activated, and then my counterpart was one of someone who ended up with the 0.01% and was taken off the path for a number of reasons, which I don't need to get into here, but he was taken off the path, and I was given a replacement counterpart, okay? So, with my former counterpart ended up being with many others, okay? I went through a lot of betrayal and rejection with this, knowing that he was my counterpart, and the fact that he was sleeping around with many others. I went through a lot of betrayal and rejection. With this, I always felt the connection was there. Once I was activated, I knew exactly why the connection was there, and there was just no care at all. And so definitely went through a lot of betrayal and rejection with this. Now, we were, me and my former counterpart, in a physical relationship at one point, and since that ended, we've been in and out of contact, back and forth, and this represented as betrayal and rejection also, because of the fact that we were in and out of contact, and the reason that we were in and out of contact was owing to either betrayal or was owing to rejection. So it definitely comes back to betrayal and rejection with that one there. Okay, yeah, also, so a family member that I was very close to ended up getting married last year? Thank you, last year. Ended up getting married last year, and my immediate family, by which I refer to, as I've told you, my mum and dad divorced when I was young. It's on my mum's side, so I'm referring to my mum, my sister, and myself. We were not invited to the wedding, and this was very much a great sense of betrayal for me, because we are we were, very family-oriented, and so it was just kind of expected that whenever anyone got married within the family, you invite all the family members. We were purposefully not invited, and so I went through a lot to do with betrayal and rejection when this did occur, but that is another example there for you. Now, please know when it comes to betrayal and rejection that the question of this template is, how strong are you to withstand it? To withstand what you are going through. Okay? If you are strong enough, you will get through it and collapse that template. Okay? So, if you are able to come back to a place of neutrality, naturally, of course, after energetically purging it, but let's say, someone betrays you while you're going through this betrayal and rejection. Someone betrays you. You have a rah-rah, you go and energetically purge it, and then you come to a point where you say, you know what, it is what it is. I remember what Mystic Diamond was saying in the School of Mystic Diamond. It is a soul core wound, betrayal and rejection. It's part of my soul contract. It's okay. I can deal with this because I know it has been contracted. Then you will be able to break that particular template that you have been assigned, okay? If not, it'll be an ongoing process, but more in the sense of until you can get to that point, okay? It's sort of like if I can equate it to going for your license, okay? So you get your learners and you start going for... I don't drive, and I definitely don't drive for a number of reasons, some of them being angelic reasons, but anyway, you get your learners and then you do all these lessons, and until you pass the test, the driving test, see, I don't drive, and you get me to use this example, bless you, until you pass the test, you don't get your license, okay? Or you don't, until you pass the test, you don't get your learners, and so therefore you're not able to drive. Thank you, that's what we're trying to say. And it's the same with this. These are all tests, and that's how we should view them. Yes, to our human, it's rah-rah central. Why do I have to go through addiction? Why do I have to deal with abandonment, separation, and da-da-da, so on and so forth? But on a soul level, these are tests. Once you pass these tests, you collapse out that portion of that template that you have been given with what you have gone through. Which in turn, as I've said earlier, does make it easier on humanity, and of course helps you. It gives you, collapsing templates and timelines is a very big part of what we do go through on the Ascension and Transcendence process. So once you pass that test, it collapses that out, and then what happens is that you won't go through this again. Or if you do, it will literally just be a quick test for you. Like, say it's addiction, say you fell really deep into alcoholism, but you got through this and you moved past it. And then you meet up with a friend who says that, they want to go to a bar and they're going to have a drink and they ask you if you want one. All that is a quick test, Are you going to succumb to this? What are you going to do with this? How are you going to handle this? So less are you going to succumb to it, but how are you going to handle being placed in this moment of temptation? Okay? And it's not necessarily a bad thing if you go for it, but it's more being mindful of why the temptation has come up. But aside from those quick tests that you will get, once you have accepted this, and once you have, once you have collapsed, thank you, because I keep forgetting the word. Once you've collapsed that template, then we simply, where's my pen? Sorry guys. So, once you've collapsed this template, we cross it out. It's done. We don't have to deal with it anymore. Okay? Same with all the others. Alright, now, let's get to the last one, shall we? As we get to the 48-minute mark, but that's okay. Victim, victimizer. Okay, now some examples of these include authority figures, controllers, narcissists, circumstances, and abuse. Okay? Now, I told you that at the end of the video I will be discussing why this category, when it comes to soul core wounds... I'd love it if you didn't move, that'd be really good. This category of soul core wounds comes with the two polarities, victim and victimizer. And the reason for this is that you do need to clear both portions. Now the way this works though is you don't complete both portions in the one human lifetime. What happens is, throughout your soul's time, throughout all your past lives and your future lives, it's a pattern of sharing this. So if you are a victim in this, if you went through the victim template of soul core wounds in this physical reality lifetime, then in the previous past life that you had, you were a victimizer. Okay? It is essential for you to do both, for your soul, thank you, for your soul to do both, so your soul understands both, has been in both situations to collapse that timeline. Okay? So if you are a victim in this lifetime, then in the most previous past timeline, you are a victimizer. And so on and so forth, it goes back, and so on and so forth, it'll go forward. So if you're a victim in this timeline, in this life, in your next life, in the next life that your soul has, you will be a victimizer once again. And it continues to go that way until we completely collapse the victim-victimizer timeline. Okay, does that make sense? If not, please feel free to email me and I can discuss that with you. Now, yeah, so I've just explained that. Okay, yeah. So to collapse both, you need to experience both. I've explained that. Alright, now, they want me to give you another example, of course they do, of me going through victim-victimizer. So in my personal experience, I have dealt with narcissists, plural, okay? I have dealt with many, many narcissists, and because I don't believe in conflict and fighting, I was a narcissist string. Yeah, big time. Things have changed a little bit for me. Now that I am in the monad level of the path of ascension, a process of transcendence, I do stand up for myself a lot more than I used to. And that's about, you may have heard the term the warrior, or embracing the warrior, or even the angelic warrior. And that's a part of the process. So because I have embraced that, things have changed, absolutely, for me. But, yeah, because I didn't believe in conflict especially prior to my activation, I was a narcissist dream. Absolutely. So I went through many, many, many narcissistic moments, many moments with narcissists when it came to the victim-victimizer timeline. Okay. Yeah, 3 of the narcissists that I dealt with were back to back to back, which is very interesting. So one of the narcissists was the ex I was telling you about with addiction, and then after leaving that one, I ended up getting with my with the person that I thought was my counterpart. Turns out now that they've been taken off the path, but at the time that we were when we were friends, and yeah. Because bless my human, prior to me being activated, I'm just having a moment here, but I'll detach from it. Because, yeah, writing it down and actually saying it out loud are 2 very different things. Yeah, so when we were friends and when we got together, he had narcissistic tendencies. And then after we broke up, I actually decided to go for a bit of a sea change, and I moved states. It didn't last that long, it was for about a month, but I moved states and went to another state in Australia, and when I was there, I met someone else. We ended up getting a relationship, and he was a narcissist as well, so I was hit bang, bang, bang 3 times in a row, back to back to back, with narcissists. And had already dealt with many narcissists prior to that already, so this was a very strong one for me, victim out of victim-victimizer. Okay, let's see. Yeah, abuse as well, yes. I have gone through physical, mental, psychological abuse, and bullying as well. And being a pacifist, this didn't help me, because I didn't fight back in the day, so it got worse as time went on. I started experiencing bullying in primary school, what we call primary school here in Australia, but it's elementary school over in the States. Yeah, so I was referred to as Poshy, which is, now that I look back on it, I really could have probably handled much better knowing what I know now, because Poshy isn't that bad. You know, they called me Posh, which I think is really interesting because at this school, even though it was a public school, it was in a very rich area, and I came from a very economically poor area to go to this school. So I found it interesting that they called me Poshy, but anyway, that is what it is. In high school, I went through all the gay stuff, so, I mean, I'm sure you can think of what I'm saying. It's been talked about for a long time now, but I went through all the gay stuff in high school. And I was part of the school's productions because I loved being part of the musicals, singing, acting, dancing. I loved all of it, and so I got a lot of crap because of that. So I was called a fairy and many other things, which, knowing what I know now, I would have been able to deal with more easily. But again, this was prior to my activation. I have also witnessed racism. This began in primary school, where I was friends with someone who was dark-skinned, and there were others that were taunting him, calling him, and I'm sorry if this triggers anything, but this is again an example, calling him chocolate milk. And I very innocently went up to my mum at the end of the day when I was being picked up, and I said, "Mum, I was hanging out with the person, and people were saying chocolate milk. He's chocolate milk. Like, I don't get it." I was when I was younger, I was quite intelligent for my age, and then yeah, things happened. Anyway, bless. And so for me, it was more. I was intrigued. Like, I don't understand what's going on. Can you explain this to me? And yeah, so she went and had a discussion with the principal. One of the most hilarious comic moments being that it turned out that this kid was actually the principal's son. So, yeah, the principal had actually adopted this kid. So, that was a beautiful moment to go through because justice was served. Not that justice isn't served otherwise, but yeah, the way that the justice was served with that was really beautiful. Now, I was tested on that. So remember how I said to you, once you collapse out the timeline, once you collapse it out, the template, thank you. Once you collapse the template out, you do get tested on it. I was tested on it yesterday. Yep, yesterday. I was in the car with a friend of mine, and this friend of mine just so happens to have darker skin. For me, I see way past skin, and, you know, I don't get why there's such a big issue with racism, like, but that's just me. I'll detach from that. Anyway, so I was in the car with my friend, and we had to do a few things. And while we were heading to wherever we were going, my friend was telling me about how she'd taken her daughter to a shopping complex we have. I think in America you call it a mall. We say shopping centre. Or in this case we call it the plaza, but anyway, had taken her daughter to the plaza, and her daughter had gotten out to guide her mum into the car parking lot, which happens, you know, am I in on all sides? So she was doing that for her mum. As her mum was turning off the engine and preparing to get out of the car, someone drove past and quite rudely yelled out of the car to my friend's daughter, who I've grown to absolutely love myself, but anyway, "Get the F out of here, you black girl." Yeah, so as you can imagine, I had a bit of a rah-rah over this when I found out that this happened, but then when I came home later that night, my higher self was reminding me, victimizer test. How are you going to deal with it? And this is why it came up for me. So, yeah, it was a tough one to go through because I've gotten to know these two kids for a while now, and though they're not my kids in some ways, you know, I feel a very close bond to them, and so when anything happens to either of them, they're both in primary school, or what in America you call elementary school, so if anything happens to them, I see as red as these gloves. So when I heard that, I was like, oh my god, and yeah, I had a reaction to it, but it is about learning, just, you know, appreciating, for me, because I have collapsed out victimizer, appreciating that that was a test for me, okay? I've also witnessed sexism from a very young age, and very quickly became a passionate feminist. One of the first times that I was allowed to choose my own category for a particular project that I was doing. So it was in sport class, and we were allowed to pick any issue to do with sport. I very quickly chose, I love tennis, so I very quickly chose the inequality of pay between men's and women's tennis, and outlining the differences of the sexism that's going on in the world of tennis. And since then, I became a very passionate feminist because I had experienced a ton of sexism that occurred through the victimizer timeline. Okay? Now that brings us to the end, and we're just about to hit the hour mark, so that's beautiful. Now that you know what they are and why, soul core wounds are something you do need to go through. So it is preferable for you to be purging the concept of soul core wounds, because I'm sure a lot of stuff has come up for your human in knowing that you've had to deal with these, or if there are some you haven't dealt with, you might be thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to now have to deal with this, so time to go and purge that. If there's anything you'd like me to elaborate on, do not hesitate to email me. I will let you go with this, and for homework tonight, take some moments to think about it, okay? But I'll see you in the next class.